After the release and overwhelmingly positive reception to the Womp Stomp Friday the 13th fan film Never Hike Alone, there has been much speculation as to where this film could fit in the Friday the 13th lore if it were to ever become canon. My theory is that the events likely would act as a new Part 5, potentially erasing everything after Part 4 and branching into its own separate timeline. My first thought for this theory is the location. In the film, Kyle comes across Camp Crystal Lake while exploring the campgrounds and finding many references to the year it had been abandoned. This is ultimately where Kyle's first contact with Jason comes into being. However, it was established in Part 6 that the name was changed to Camp Forest Green, which mirrors the town's name change from Wessex County as well. But by Part 7, the town is renamed once again to Crystal Lake. And in Part 8, we see an abandoned camp with a rundown Camp Crystal Lake sign over the pier, meaning that at some point they either changed the name of the camp back or Forest Green was completely located somewhere else. Even though Tommy on multiple occasions makes mention that Camp Forest Green is in fact a rebranded Camp Crystal Lake, which doesn't make sense for the name to be changed back by Part 8. Then there's the crime scene ribbons, showcasing each location of where characters were murdered by Pamela Voorhees, indicating that the location has remained untouched since the first film. Also meaning that Camp Forest Green likely never existed in this timeline, removing the events of Part 6 on from the Never Hike Alone canon. Next is that Kyle only mentions Pamela as the killer, while Jason seemingly remains as a myth or legend, meaning that the events of the first film had become public knowledge and well documented, while Jason's murder spree of 1984 was seemingly deemed as not being related or just attributed to the overall myth or legend. This to me doesn't rule out the events of parts 2, 3, and 4 as canon, but may rule out part 5. My thoughts here is that in part 5, it's become pretty well known that Jason was the killer in events of parts 2, 3, and 4, which is why Roy emulates him. But if Kyle only attributed Jason's stories to being a myth or legend, then the public knowledge of Jason's murders likely doesn't exist, meaning that the point Jason became undead was most likely when Tommy killed him with the machete at the end of part 4, and not at the cemetery in part 6, especially when considering that Jason was still moving his fingers after the initial head chop into his brain. This likely would mean that at some point, Jason regained consciousness and fled into the woods, making his way back to Camp Crystal Lake, where he ultimately stayed, possibly killing here and there over the decades, just now being an undead monster that refuses to stay down. Now, a lot of people do see the appearance of Tom Matthews as Tommy Jarvis as an indication that the events of part 6 did happen, but I think it was pretty much only meant to be a familiar face to cameo on the heels of his appearance as the same character in the game. But overall, I think that Jason likely came back to life at the end of part 4, leaving no body for the authorities to really say it was Jason, perpetuating the myth and letting it snowball, likely bringing teenagers to the location seeking thrills from a supposed ghost story. This is likely where Jason also got the hockey mask we see in Never Hikes Alone, taking it from an unsuspecting victim, especially considering that it is lacking the chevrons and the axe cut from Chris Higgins. But that's my theory. Do you agree? Or do you have your own canon for Never Hike Alone? Comment below with your own theory, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe, as well as hitting the notification bell to be alerted whenever I go live, Sundays through Wednesdays, or a new video is uploaded. And don't forget to follow me on all my social media for cosplays, updates, and more. Links will be in the description below. And as always, I am JG Darhk, and thanks for watching.